Picture this. It's September 2025, and Donald Trump steps up to the UN podium saying, "What's the purpose of the United Nations?" His voice is sharp, almost taunting. The room gasps. X lights up with reactions. Some cheer and some scoff. Classic Trump, right? Say something bold, maybe exaggerated, but with just enough truth to make everyone squirm. His question isn't new, but it's a spark. It forces us to ask, why does the UN exist? What was it meant to be? And what's it actually done? In this episode, we're not here to disparage the UN or to defend it. Instead, we're using Trump's jab as a flare to guide us through its history, from its intellectual roots to its rocky evolution. This is part one of a two-part series. And today we're diving into how the UN was born and how it survived a world of superpowers. Let's go. Welcome to Global Risk Profile, where we break down the headlines that matter and the ones that should. The UN didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 1945. Its roots go deep and tie to an old human dream, a world where nations cooperate, not clash. Back in 1795, philosopher Immanuel Kant sketched a vision of perpetual peace, a federation of republics that could end war through law. A few years earlier, Jeremy Bentham coined the term international law, planting the seed for global rules. By 1849, Victor Hugo, of the Les Miserables of fame, was dreaming of a United States of Europe, where markets, not battlefields, would unite people. These weren't just ideas. The 19th century saw experiments in global cooperation. The Red Cross in 1863 to aid war victims. The Hague Conferences of 1899 to set rules for warfare. Hague, remember? Even earlier, humans tried this in other forms. Rome's Pax Romana, the papacy mediating between kings, or the Concert of Europe after Napoleon, where great powers met to keep the peace. Flawed, often self-serving, but the instinct was there. Build something above the chaos of rival states. Fast forward to 1920. The League of Nations was the first big swing at this dream, a parliament of man to prevent another world war. It came from Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, promising a world where nations, big and small, could arbitrate disputes. But the League had cracks from the start. The US itself never joined, with Congress refusing to ratify Wilson's vision. It had no army and no real power. When Japan invaded Manchuria, Italy took Ethiopia, and Hitler marched into Europe, the League was a bystander, a debating club dictators ignored. Still, its failure perhaps wasn't totally wasted. It taught lessons that shaped what came next. By 1945, World War II had left the world in ashes. Leaders like Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill said, "Never again." The UN was their second draft, built on four hard-learned lessons. First, the US had to be in. Roosevelt made sure America led the charge, and also the UN headquarters is in New York, in the United States. Second, keep all the great powers inside. The UN gave the five victors, US, Soviet Union, China, Britain, France, permanent Security Council seats and veto power, a gritty compromise to avoid walkouts. Third, give peace teeth. The UN's Charter Chapter 7 allowed military force to stop threats, unlike the League's weak sanctions. And fourth, economic collapse and colonial unrest had fueled war, so the UN added development, human rights, and decolonization to its mission. In San Francisco, Harry Truman, that inherited the presidency from Roosevelt, closed the founding conference with a challenge. If we fail to use it, we shall betray all those who died. The UN was born more pragmatic, more ambitious, but already facing a new storm, the Cold War. Barely a year old, and the UN hit a wall. The US and the Soviet Union turned the Security Council into a standoff, vetoing each other's moves. Big conflicts like Hungary in 1956, Vietnam, Afghanistan in 1979, gridlocked the UN. Collective security more like collective stalemate. But the UN didn't vanish. It pivoted. It became a referee for smaller conflicts, where superpowers didn't care enough to block action. In 1956, Canadian diplomat Lester Pearson invented peacekeeping, blue-helmeted troops patrolling tense borders, like between Egypt and Israel after the Suez Crisis. The formula stuck. Cyprus, Congo, the Middle East. The UN also gave new nations a voice. In the General Assembly, decolonized states from Africa and Asia stood equal to superpowers, at least symbolically. And its humanitarian arms, UNICEF, UNHCR, fed refugees, vaccinated kids, and built schools. Quiet, messy, but vital work, if done right. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the US stood alone. No more veto wars. Surely this would be the UN's golden age. At first, it looked promising. In 1990, the Security Council backed a US-led coalition to expel Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Collective security felt real. Peacekeeping surged. Cambodia, Mozambique, Bosnia. But cracks appeared. In Rwanda in 1994, UN peacekeepers watched helplessly as genocide unfolded. In Bosnia, the Srebrenica safe area became a massacre. The UN lacked resources to match its ambitions. And the US, it wanted UN legitimacy when it suited it, like Kuwait, but ignored it elsewhere, like Kosovo in 1999 or Iraq in 2003. The UN was useful when America needed a stamp of approval and irrelevant when it didn't. After 9/11, the US shifted focus to the war on terror. Afghanistan, Iraq, drones. The UN tried to keep up, endorsing America's right to self-defense and tracking terrorist financing. But when the US sought approval for Iraq in 2003, the Security Council said no. Washington invaded anyway, leaving the UN sidelined, its inspectors ignored. Meanwhile, another power was rising. China, flush with cash from its 2001 WTO entry, started flexing influence inside the UN. Chinese nationals led agencies like the FAO and the ITU, and Beijing phrases like win-win cooperation crept into resolutions. By the time COVID hit in 2019, critics accused the World Health Organization of echoing China's talking points, raising questions about who really shapes the UN. So, the UN was born from big dreams and hard lessons, but it's been shaped by power struggles. First the Cold War, and then America's dominance, then China's quiet rise. Trump's question in 2025 cuts deep because it exposes a truth. The UN's never been what it promised. But is it useless, or is it doing things we can't live without? In part 2, we'll zoom into 2025, what the UN actually does today, how it spends its $60 billion budget, and whether it's still worth it in a fractured world. Stay tuned. This is it for this episode of Global Risk Profile. If you found this useful, thoughtful, or just different, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Remember, the headlines may change, but the deeper patterns rarely do. Thanks for listening, and stay sharp.